I'm also sure that this talk has reminded many of us about one of Swamiji's quote on history of India, which is, when the real history of India will be unearthed, it will be proved that as in the matters of religion, so in fine arts and science, India is the primal guru of the whole world. Now, now the floor is in the YouTube comment section. Okay, ma'am, we have the first question. Uh, are there any archaeological evidence found anywhere in India whose carbon dating dates back to the age of Ramayana?
Carbon dating is just one tool. It is not the be-all, end-all tool. And carbon dating again is very wide. It gives a plus or minus many hundred years. So that is a very limited tool, and it happened to be a tool to be used some few decades back. It's not the only tool anymore. One, yes. So see, earlier they said carbon dating to products even back only 2,000 years, 3,000 years. Now with every decade, they're going back to events going back 4,000 years, 5,000 years, 6,000 years. Now you've got carbon dating of events going back from Afghanistan and west of the Sindhu River to a place called Mehergar in eastern Afghanistan, going back 7,000, 8,000 years. In Lanka, you've got this. Now you've got Kurdish going back in South India, going back to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years. So it's happening all over. It's opening up now. The moment you open up things, you get to see more and more things. And it's all, then you had the famous chariot of Sanauli in Uttar Pradesh, which goes back 5,000 years plus. So it's happening all over consistently. So the short answer to your question is yes, more and more sites are opening up to dates which are comparable to these across the land, right from Afghanistan in the west to Burma in the east to Sri Lanka in the south. It's always opening up, and repeatedly we're getting every year we're getting newer and newer and older artifacts to be.
Just one point here, actually, would want to draw your attention to our real life experience that we had. See, when we were visiting Egypt, we found a lot of people surreptitiously selling some kind of old artifacts. Okay, these kind of from excavations that they were finding. So when we would ask them, how do you say they are genuine? Where did you find them? They'll say, oh, it is in our own house, somewhere under here, somewhere under there, and so on. And then when we ask them, so why don't you give it to the authorities? They say that if we show coming up from under our house, they will take away our land. Be gone, because that will become a big dig excavation site, and we will have to vacate and move. Our life will get disrupted. So many of them they were not disclosing that they were finding artifacts in their place, because Egypt is a very rich ancient civilization. So wherever you now come back similarly to India. Now India too has got all the potential, but look at it, we have been a continuous civilization. So wherever in Ayodhya and all other parts, wherever Ram would have visited, today we are living so many generations even after that. In fact, the very case of this Ayodhya temple is you could see so many temples being built which had been constructed one above the other. Yes. So unless you go all the way down, you will not be able to find artifacts, and they may not even be there, because people will keep reusing. See, today you remodel your house, you knock down something, you reuse something, you build over there, and there is hardly an inch of ancient city today. There is no place even to walk in ancient cities like Kashi, Varanasi, and all that. So where are you going to dig and find artifacts that you can carbon date? So that is a bigger challenge for us to get our worthy enough to carbon date and tell you the real history.
See, artifacts are possible only when the people have your own house, your own apartment. You keep on remodeling every few years. So you keep changing. So there are thousands of kings that have come and gone, hundreds of thousands of families that have come and gone. So obviously remodeling is possible. Let's take the example of in Tamil Nadu, the Kiradi, which is so famous nowadays. We would not know about Kiradi at all, but for that family, that lady there, that nameless lady who gave up her coconut grove for excavation site. That's a, you can talk all thing about all the archaeologists doing the work, but fundamentally it was a lady of a family who said, okay, you can excavate under my coconut grove. So it's actually a crude excavation in the midst of a coconut grove. Look at the aerial map of it. She gave up her coconut plants, her grove of her generation to find out about our civilization that lived many generations ago. So that is essential. You should understand it from this perspective. Yes, the next question, please.
Okay, sir. Uh, is there is the academic circle now opening to this new dimension of understanding history through archaeoastronomy?
Yes,
Any
they are
attempt
opening up.
in this?
Yes, archaeoastronomy is opening up as a new dimension in many universities, especially in Canada, US, and Europe. They're opening up. Australia also. They have a proper academic course on archaeoastronomy now. Just to understand this, because for them they wanted to date the Greek events, not so much the events of India, but the Greek, and then they wanted to try to date even the Babylonian. The events in Persian, and then Sumeria, and then the Bethlehem event. So they've accepted it as now a mainstream course. Archaeoastronomy is, yes, now a mainstream course in universities in the Western world, but not yet in India. Once it comes as a mainstream course in India, because we have so much Purana, we can date 1,000 things in India. They have hardly a handful of things to date. We have thousands of things to date. So we need many scholars, and all those who have now done the archaeoastronomy dating over the last few decades using the software are all people who have done out of the self-interest.
See, all this historicity of Rama or Krishna, if you see, much of this work has come from independent scholars, not as part of any academic research. Interestingly, if you want to even look at archaeoastronomical dating of Rama and Krishna, look at the kind of skills that you need. First, you should have read these texts. You should be proficient in Sanskrit. You should be able to read those texts, understand what is written there. Next, you should be able to know astronomy as per Indian timekeeping method, Jyotisha. Then you should know, to be able to do it quickly, you should be able to handle this kind of software. So you should be familiar with IT. Software. You should be familiar with astrophysics, because these new modeling software, they talk about all these phenomenon in astrophysical terms. So you should be able to map, understand those. So look at and then finally, you also should be familiar with the geography as well. So I should be able to say, okay, Nasik is this place, whatever name they have used in the old literature, it maps to such and such a place. And because that event and the time frame, you should be able to map. So amount of skills that you need.
Interdisciplinary skills, as what she says, is needed. But look at the present day
along with an open mindset.
Look at the present day history teachers. Do they have it? Do they have this skill set to do this? Before they say, no, this is not part of mainstream. The question is to them.
Academic historians, not history teachers, but
academic historians. Do they have the skill set to understand this and spend 10, 20 years of their life in doing it to understand? The question is actually to them, to the academic historians, whether they have the skill set to get into this new field. Because knowledge keeps on updating. You cannot say, I taught physics before the computer era came, so I'm not going to touch computers at all. Then you cannot be teaching. You have to be current in research.
Yes, next question.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is whether there is more to unfold or reveal in history of Rama and Krishna, which today the students of archaeoastronomy and other fields in India can do.
Yes, there's a lot more to unfold. It is now for youngsters like you to take the baton on. It's like a long relay race. Our illustrious predecessors, noble predecessors, have taken the relay race baton and come this far. And we, with our limited skills, have been able to build. Now we are passing on the baton to you youngsters. You take it forward. And we have produced what we can through our books called Autobiography of India, 100 volumes, and placing it for you people to read and take forward the baton to next level. So you can take it forward along with your primary career. engineer or professional or corporate or whichever career that you take up, in that, do this also and take it forward to the next generation. So it's now up to you now.
I will just fundamentally touch upon something. I don't know if that question is coming up at all, but I'll put forth the question. I'll let the cat among the pigeons. I showed you a date as 10th January 511 E as the birth date for Rama. And but then today, if you look at it, we celebrate his birthday in April. And for us, this date never changes because we follow the Indian calendar where it is Chaitra month. So whenever it is Chaitra month and you have a Navami there, you celebrate it. Of course, you will have some variance because of the lunar calendar, solar calendar, and so on. So, but why this slip between then it was January as per the software, whereas now you're showing April? Then there is a motion which is a phenomenon which is called the precession of equinox, which is creating this drift over so many years, once in so many years. I mean, that's a...
Once in 72 years, it slips by one day.
So that is something that is set, and that's a thing that we can use to understand. But today, again, if you look at some of the work done by a few more people who are going into the archaeoastronomy further, you will find that this notion of precession itself is now being looked at differently compared to what we have been thinking about for the last few decades. So even that idea is now being challenged, and a newer thought seems to show up. So these texts, if you follow these and try to understand those timekeeping methods, more and more questions will arise, which will lend more clarity to your current understanding of astronomy and physics and sciences as well. So there are two reasons why you need to pursue this. One is, well, from a historical perspective, we can get more dates, but at the same time, from all this literature, you're getting a wealth of information to scale up further our current understanding of sciences as well.
Yes, please. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. We'll move to the next question.
Yes, please.
So it is regarding languages. Which is the oldest language, Tamil or Sanskrit?
You have two eyes. Which eye is older? Left eye or the right eye? Huh?
And interestingly, both the eyes, they give you a good complete picture. They corroborate each other's image. It's very interesting how
without one eye, can you get the 3D depth? You need both eyes for an all-round perspective, holistic perspective. Both, see, Panini, one of the, we think is earliest, but he calls himself a later grammarian. Similarly, in Tamil, also you have a series of grammarians who come through, and Agananuru, Purananuru, Sangam text, all this you have, and you come up with grammarians here. And what do they say? I can show you the text if you want. You want to go to the slide and show them, because this question is asked. Let's so both we call the earliest grammarian in the Tamil language, who himself calls himself a later grammarian. Similarly, in Sanskrit, you have what we know as earliest grammarian, who we know as a later grammarian. So both of them, they very clearly say that it's a common source from the same time. Let's look at that. Look at the antiquity of languages, both. See, look at seeing Panini here. Panini in his Ashtadhyayi says it comes from Indra, which in turn comes from Shiva. That's what he gives a sequence. And this is the shloka for it in Panini's Ashtadhyaya grammar, Sutra number 14. Similarly, if you look at Tamil, you got Tolkappiyar, who again says his grammar is based on Indra grammar, which in turn is derived from Shiva grammar. That's what Tolkappiyar says. We look at Tolkappiyar as the earliest, but he calls himself a later grammarian. Similarly, if you go in the case of Panini, we look at him as the earliest grammarian, but he himself calls himself as a later grammarian. So both are early grammarians. So what does it say then? Both of them, both Tamil and Panini in Sanskrit, both of them say that their language, Sanskrit and Tamil, in turn comes from Indra, which in turn comes from Shiva. What is Indra? Indra is Indriya, the senses, and Shiva is life, Jivan. So both the languages come from life, the senses, and then comes down to us. So which sense is earlier, which sense is later is your ear born later and your eyes born earlier, or is your nose born earlier and your eyes born later? Similarly, life, which aspect of your life is earlier or later? So both are twin parallel. Which of the twin brothers is born earlier? It's for you to decide. They're actually twinning. So
And you find corroborations of
in both of them.
words in both. And I mean, through our, as we have come across so many other words and all that, we find words like diamond mapping to the Tamil word Adam. Adamas is what the
Adam.
Greeks call it. Adam, because diamond means that which is hard. And that you find mapping with Adam. And in Sanskrit also you find Ad ke rehna, I mean, which comes in Hindi as Ad. That means firmness across both these languages. I think we all have to move away from the mindset that there is just one. I mean, we have to be open that there have been people across the world all living around same time. There have been many cultures also.
So it's
we are still presenting.
no, you have to move to that one.
Yeah, stop presenting.
So we have to move to the mindset of one-upmanship, and both are brethren, both belong to one family. Okay, and it was Sahodara. It is not Samadara. It's not equal. Sama is equal. Saho is complementary. So both are complementing each other. That's a mindset perspective, and we have to move to the parochial thought. That's fundamentally it's a issue of mindset.
There is never just one of anything in this entire world. There have been people everywhere. So even before Columbus discovered America, there were the natives living there. There were natives, aborigines living in Australia before the British went there and took over. So there have been civilizations all over this earth. And each of them have developed speaking, speech, thought. And so that's the beauty.
So there's no question of, it's not I or me, it is we. And both of us are good, both of us are correct, or both of us are Sanskrit. Both have their roots from their respective grammarians, Panini and Tolkappiyar, and both say it comes from Indra, and both in turn come and say it comes from Shiva, life itself.
Thank you, sir.
Next question, sir.
For this detailed explanation, I also had this kind of doubt. Another question very similar to this. Dravidian languages have different origins than Sanskrit. This seems to support Aryan invention theory.
Say there is no Aryan invention theory at all. It is totally a construct of the colonials. Before colonials came, we never had that idea. The very word Dravidya comes from the word Dravya,
riches, and also moving, to move. So if you really look at this part of the peninsular India, this is something that is constantly moving and hitting the Himalayan plate. I mean, the Eurasian plate. And so it is known, it was very well known. If you even, and this you will get beautifully from the name of Tibet. It was Trivishta, meaning thrice folded land.
Please look at our short film to get it there.
It's in the playlist called Bharat, that is India, where we show that how the ancient thought had known about this movement. The name Arya is a linguistic word which means noble. So the land, the people of the erstwhile India who were on the other side of the Vindhyas, they called themselves Arya. That is only one part. Even there they had different other lands as well. One section just called themselves Aryavarta. That is all. And the word Dravida is actually a geographical word. It is nothing to do with race, and it is nothing to do with race that have come from outside into India. So, and that has been proven from many angles. We've written about this extensively in our book, Breaking the Myths About Identity.
Please check it out. Please check out the book, Breaking the Myths. It's there, details on this. Actually, if you look at this, it's not, Dravida is not just Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. Dravida is Pancha Dravida, the original term.
Anything below the Vindhyas.
Including Saurashtra and Maharashtra is part of the Pancha Dravida. One, that's one. And the word Dravida itself is a Sanskrit word. Because Adi Shankara when he goes to Kashi, Varanasi, and introduces himself as Dravida Shishu in the Sanskrit language, child of the Dravida land, Dravida Shishu. And this he does this when 2,500 years ago, when he goes, he uses this term. So both Sanskrit and Dravida languages are all what you call as Mani Pravalam. Both are gems, and they have smooth flowing gems. That's why you have the term called, there's a language which has got a lot of mix of Tamil and a lot of mix of Sanskrit. It is a language not so much used now, but used a few centuries ago. It was called Mani Pravalam, the beautiful gems. Pravalam, the beautiful flow, like Saras with the graceful flow. So Mani Pravalam is a flowing, graceful languages which has taken words from both languages, Sanskrit and Tamil, and developed on its own and lived for many centuries, the language of Mani Pravalam, especially among scholars. I think we have taken much of your time as far as these questions are concerned. Any more questions, or can we come to an end?
We can take the last question of this session, if you have time.
Sure.
Okay. If one wants to engage in archaeoastronomy discovery of our history, is there any course offered anywhere to study this science?
At Bharat Gyan, we are offering a lot of courses, but if you want only archaeoastronomy courses now, it is available in some universities in America, which you can check out on the Google now.
I would also recommend, if there are people who are very keen on doing such archaeoastronomy courses, then they could get in touch with some of the Indian scholars who have touched on archaeoastronomy and who have used archaeoastronomy extensively, both from an Indic perspective as well as from using using astrophysics and astronomy, modern astronomy. And you know that they will be actually trendsetters to kind of formalize this as a course for Indic knowledge systems itself.
Okay.
Thank you, sir and madam, for explaining all our questions in a great detail. For other questions which we are not able to ask due to time constraints, I'd like to request viewers to kindly mail at Bharat Gyan. They will be happy to answer you.
It's BHARATHGYAN. The spelling, I've already shown you the slide there, bharatgyan@gmail.com. Please do send us. We'll be happy to take your questions. Please go through our content before asking us questions, because let it be that you have gone through the content and clarified and then ask further questions. Don't ask basic questions before going through the content. We'll appreciate that from you, because we'll be happy to answer questions after you go through the due work.
And again, I want to mention to all our viewers that many similar contents like historical Rama, historical Krishna, and other books are available for sale. You can also visit Bharat Gyan website for more details.
Thank you so much.